Isn't it brilliant? It is my absolute pleasure right now to introduce Aisling Bea and Aasif Mandvi.
What's up, New York? Hello. Oh, I love a boy band stool. Yeah, I feel like we're all in a boy band. And when we hit the high note, we can all step off and go, ha, like that. Yeah.
I wanted to start by asking you about the initial genesis of the show and kind of where you saw the initial thread, because it touches on so many different topics. We've obviously got kind of loneliness, immigration, family, sibling relationships, and like, what was the initial spark and thread that you saw when you started writing it?
Well,
War.
thank you for asking. Oh, sorry.
It was, how do I work with Aasif Mandvi? The initial thing was sisters, really. Just that I love the, because I think there's something different about, hello, by the way, everyone. Oh, thanks for, I only said that so I could get another little round of applause. Feed me. I love, there's something different to, I think, siblings or family, how family speaks to each other over a pair of friends. And I love the sort of meanness you can use with family that you wouldn't necessarily get away with friends. They're like, I can walk away from you. Whereas like his sister's like, I'm always going to be attached to you, so I'm going to have to find a way to make this work. And so I loved that dynamic and language. Myself and Sharon had been writing another show which we've been working on for 2 years, and then we got a phone call saying no, and they didn't want it. So I wrote the big, like, rough draft of this one in about 12 hours, annoyed, basically, while my sister was in another room, and I was annoyed at her, so I sort of tapped something out, and it's a bit late now. She's kind of annoyed about it, but yeah. So that's kind of how it came.
And there was a really long time period between initially having a pilot and then actually creating the rest of the series, like a year and a half or so.
Yeah.
So what was the continued development, and kind of what aspects of the show shifted and changed from the experience of putting that pilot together and seeing it come to fruition for the first time?
Not loads of stuff in terms of the visuals and how it looks. I was lucky enough to get Alex Winkler, who's our director on the show. We'd been pals for quite a long time. And I think all of us, we wanted to kind of create an environment where ideally everyone could come and do their best job. And so Alex is a very visual person, and he brought in his favourite DOP and we were like, if everyone gets to do their best, most creative job, it's not the biggest payer. Sorry, Asa, we spent all the money on him. Hollywood actors. And so we had nothing left for anyone else.
I bought 3 candy bars.
Yeah, out of your poor, you had to enjoy coming back to the UK because it wasn't worth your time cash-wise. So we really still appreciate it. Yeah, if it's not going to be the most big budget sort of show, you'd hope at least everyone gets respected and looked after at work, and also gets to be the most creative they can be. So if I was kind of lauding about going, no, I want it shot a certain way, that means someone else doesn't get to do their sort of, have a creative input on it. So yeah, that's sort of in the pilot we tried to make sure that happened, and then going forward that was our favourite thing that worked with it as a dynamic, and everyone wanted to come back after the pilot, which was also a good sign. So yeah.
And Asif, I wanted to ask you about your involvement. I think you do such a fantastic job in taking a character who's not on screen the whole time in every single episode. Later episodes, we see you a lot more. But we still get such a sense of the depth and layers. So kind of, how do you prep for a role where you're creating and crafting this backstory for yourself that we're maybe not seeing on screen? Like, we know that he was married, but we don't know any more than that yet.
Well, actually, it was talking to Aisling was really helpful since she had written it. And just getting a sense of that, the relationship, it was really easy for me because working with her and Sharon, it was like working with 2 real sisters. And so it was, that dynamic already existed, and then just my role in that, sort of wanting to have a relationship, like a normal relationship, and then just having this, her sister come over and yet having a sort of sibling type relationship with her in a way as well.
It is a bit third wheelie, you can only ever get so. With myself and Sharon, we do have such a sister dynamic. After Sharon wrapped, she had to finish all her scenes in 2 weeks, and on her last day I said to her, and my sister was designing the costumes, my real sister, so she designed all the costumes for it. And on the day Sharon finished, I was like, oh my God, I just feel like I'm losing my sister, and my real sister was behind me. So where there is, it's an unfortunate thing in that you'll always end up being the third wheel sort of thing, which is the character as well. So we made you feel like that on set, did we?
It was nice. It was nice. I felt that many times. No, but it was just so easy, you know, just to fall into that because the dynamic of the two of them is so great. And so I just, my thing was just, okay, I'm having a relationship with this woman. I want to have a normal sort of relationship and just to play that. And it's written really well. So I felt like it was not difficult for me to fall into
when I met Asif, I was like, oh my God, I hope he does it, because technically you're playing what has traditionally been the girlfriend role, you know, and for someone to have someone come in a smaller role and bring all of their comedy experience to make sure it doesn't become a one-dimensional person that you don't care about or want to see what their story is. It's like that. We're really lucky with all the cast in the show. Like everyone's really pulling their weight, and so that's what was so like when I met Asif in New York. We almost went on like a friend date, and I was like, "Will you be in the show?" And I didn't actually want to say that straight to your face and get
it was
rejected.
great because I actually saw you had made a little teaser, like a 10-minute thing that you see, which is part of the beginning of the first episode.
Some bits of it,
Some bits of that, and they sent that to me, and I watched it, and I just thought it was so great. And I had never met Aisling before, and I was just like, oh, this is great. I really want to be part of this if it's possible. And then they said, oh, Aisling's in New York, and you know, would you want to meet her and stuff? And I was like, oh, that's great. And then I realized there was something happened right on our.
Yes, because I turned up and Asif never did.
And I just didn't show up.
You just didn't show up. And then the second time you really showed up, literally.
I did really show up,
yeah.
And then we had, and I just remember
real
it was like
neggy
around
move,
Christmas.
you know. Real status pulling move.
I was
clever.
We had a miscommunication about the date, and then we did.
Yeah, you got it wrong.
meet.
You got the date wrong,
Right.
and that was a miscommunication.
I believe there were 2 dates, and I picked the wrong one. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway,
okay.
I just remember that we met up somewhere downtown, and then there was a guy who was dressed as sexy Santa Claus. And by the end of the night, we were taking pictures with the sexy Santa
Claus.
and he was lifting us up and because he was a big muscle guy, and he was.
Yes.
And I was like, this is going to be.
It's
great.
funny because I was working on a job where Asif was obviously on The Daily Show, and I was making another show that was written by a producer on The Daily Show, and he was like, oh my God, Asif would be perfect for your show. And he's like, I don't know how you two will get along though, because you're both a lot. And I was like, all right, well, I think you're...
Which is an insult to both of us.
Yeah, exactly.
Really.
I was like, and so cut to, and he's like, he's just like, I just wonder how you're going to get along. And I'm like, okay. And cut to me sending pictures of myself and Asif in sexy Santa, he was just wearing tiny underwear, had a ripped body and a Santa hat, which is, you know, a variation on the traditional theme. And it was like Asif in his arms and me being like, hey! So yeah.
It worked out.
Yeah, so go to hell, Tim.
There you go. That's a terrific new show also coming out with Aisling in it called Living with Yourself
Oh,
on
yeah.
Netflix. So
Yeah, that's a little plug there, may as well.
And then because Aisling, you mentioned a little bit about the idea of actors coming onto set and they just have smaller parts. They're not in every scene. And you've been acting for about 17 years professionally. So you've had that experience of showing up on set and maybe just having a line. So how did you want to nurture those actors that were coming in?
Oh yeah, I've been every one of quick. Is that okay? Is that okay? Thanks for having me. Great, bye. Like I've done all the jobs. Oh my God, I've done all the jobs. I was in, actually my friend Maeve is in, and I was in Fair City, which is an Irish soap that we have at home, and you get one take to do any scene, unless like the set fell over and it burned down. Then they probably go, right, we'll probably have to go again. And you do the worst acting. They're like, right, time to move on. So I've done all the jobs. But one thing I was really inspired by was Atlanta, which is one of my favorite comedies, Donald Glover's on the show. And I think that because that was written by an actor, I think actors know what it's like to go in and only have one line. And I sort of feel guilty asking any actor to come in if there's not just a bit of a joke in there or a bit of something like, and if you do that, you create a complex world. And I always think you should be a little bit, whoa, that person there, will they be back again? Like you should feel like, oh, they might have a thread, and everyone should have their own movie and spin-off series in a way. And it naturally makes a show more exciting to watch. And in Atlanta, I always remember, I think it's in the first series, just a guy comes over to deliver a burger, and you will never see him again, but you wouldn't know you're never going to see him again, because he comes in, he's got like a really crazy vibe about him, and then he just leaves. And he just delivered a burger. It didn't take any longer than you might have done for a boring line, but he just got to create a bit of like fabric within the show. So yeah, I hope, and that we were so lucky with casting as well, that everyone was able to bring a bit of something to their role.
And it was your first experience doing post-production as well and going through that process.
Yeah.
I think you were in Rome some of the time doing it at night, but shooting during the day. So what was that process like, and what did that teach you about yourself as a performer for future projects?
I will never want to do it again. That was awful. It was so in my head, I thought you filmed the thing and then you might do like an hour a week where you give a few notes. Because in my head, oh, we shot it and there's a script, so you know how all the shots are going to be, like duh. And it really is really long and hard and loads of takes and having to look at your own stupid face all day long and reel after reel. And also every time I didn't realize the first cut they do of a show is never going to be good. Even the best thing in the world, it's always going to be like a door slamming really loudly, no music, no atmosphere. It's like, you know, when you try on something, sir, before you've had your makeup done. You know, and you're like, okay, but like, imagine I just put my makeup on though. Imagine it when I've got makeup and hair on. But it never looks as good. So that was the hardest part of it, because it was an alien process for me, and how long it took. And also that you've deadlines and simple things like creatively. Like I was writing the show over Christmas and I didn't fly home for Christmas because the show needed to be done. And that's a sort of like, you know, a creative timeline you have. But suddenly to go, oh, you want to do notes, but everything has to be finished by Thursday. So if you say you can't get your notes until Friday, that's sorry, we don't have the budget for an editor to be there for 3 extra hours. And you're like, whoa, I never thought of practical adult responsibility things like that. You're like, oh, could we not just like find the money? Like, could we do like a lemonade stand or something outside and just get the money together? And she's like, no, she has kids and she can't stay. And you're like, oh. So that was a real shock to the system. Yeah.
And Asif, one of the things I think is so interesting about your career is the number of arenas in which you've worked, whether it's
I thought you were going to say the number of bits of shit you've done. I mean,
that too.
How are you still going?
Yeah.
Whether it's kind of being a correspondent on The Daily Show, doing stand-up, and obviously working on something like The Daily Show, you're responding to news in such a quick and timely way. And when you were hired for that, you were hired day of, and then you were on the show that night. Yeah. So how do you feel that kind of boot camp training has prepped you for every time you walk onto a set, just rolling with a lot of the changes that happen, even down to this show?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, one of the things I learned from The Daily Show was that nothing goes the way you planned it to go. And so you really do have to like have your improv skills always ready to go. I mean, it's a little different with a scripted show, but even in that arena, like, you know, things will happen and there are moments that will just organically, you know, have these incredible lucky accidents sometimes where you'll discover something in the moment. And The Daily Show was just, that was it. You know, it was just, we would go out there and we would interview people and they would say things that, you know, mostly their lawyers wish they had never said, and we would take advantage of that, and often we'd have to roll with it and figure out how to like build a whole thing around what we didn't expect to happen. So it was a boot camp in sort of like just being in the moment and being true to whatever happens in that moment, and that you translate into scripted material as well, you know. This or anything else.
I suppose it's letting go of perfection in some way as well. You have to let go
they
of
do
the
say
idea of something
perfection is the enemy of the good.
Whoa.
You know? And so think
Lot
about
to
that,
unpack
babe.
there,
What
man.
do you think about it?
Yeah.
No, but that's true. You sort of just adapt to whatever, you know, it's what you're saying as well about the post-production process, which I've also been in, and it's that thing of like, you know, they often say like making a TV show or making a movie or something is kind of like painting on a train track while the train is barreling down.
Yeah.
And it's basically the painting you can get done before that train hits you, and then you're off, you know, and that's it. And so, you know, there's always that tension between creativity and inspiration and resources and money. And it's that tension that actually often is the driving thing that forces you to be creative and to figure out how to do it. You know, my favorite story is the one about Steven Spielberg and Jaws when the shark didn't work, and it just didn't work. And so he was like, screw the shark, we'll just put the camera where the shark's supposed to be, and we'll come up with this really cool music. And that was the way Jaws went from being a sort of horror slasher blood flick to like being a thriller, and you know, the rest
That'd
is
be a
history.
great way to like not turn up on set. Just point to where I'm supposed to act and put some music on. Worked for Jaws. I'm having a day off.
Here's the music.
Yeah.
Dun-na, dun-na. Yeah.
Oh, the actress is coming. She hasn't had a snack.
I wanted to ask you, Aisling, a little bit about one of the threads in the show where you have Sharon's character, Shona, starting a group for women in a male-dominated industry, because you've done so much work in stand-up comedy, and a lot of the panel quiz shows you've been on have been very male-dominated, and you've talked publicly about that a little bit. Was that kind of idea of mentorship something that you found within the industry for yourself, or was it something that you wished you had at a certain point to support you?
No, I've never wished I've had it, because I have had it. I mean, the fact that I'm making my show with Sharon's production company that she set up is a perfect example of that, especially with this show. This show is a perfect example of mentorship, because Sharon is like a big sister in that way. And we've been working together for 9 years now. Since I was 16. And not the time to laugh, boys and girls. Yay! Finally, creepy guy in the front. She still looks 16, but I'm not. I don't know. Oh, in my dreams. Oh, really? But yes, just a nice little bit of riffing there. Why not? But yeah, so mentoring, especially I think within the females within our industry, definitely happens. There's a lovely community, and I genuinely don't wish to be a man in this industry, actually. I love being in the female comedy community. I know I can land in to any country and find who the female stand-ups are. And actually one of my friends, Maeve Higgins, who's here, who's an amazing Irish stand-up and writer, and actress, who's also in a movie that's coming out, which looks very funny. What's the name of it again, Maeve? Extraordinary. It looks super funny. No problem, Maeve. See you for a pint later. But Maeve would be a perfect example of like, I land in, she puts me on her gig in New York that she runs. You know, you could land into London and do the same, and the same thing happens with female comedians in LA. I've gone to Vancouver and hopped onto gigs. So there is we do look after each other, and that's a really nice thing to see. I think there was an idea for a while, like an old pop psychology idea that wasn't actually backed up on anything, about this limited amount of space. So if you take up space, that you might be taking it from another woman, or there might be only one slot. Whereas what we've seen now is that we can all tell our stories, and if the television slots get full up, then Netflix springs up, then Hulu springs up, then Facebook TV springs up, and another form of storytelling that we have yet to experience. Like, there will never be a limit to how many women want to watch other stories and stuff like that. So yeah.
One of the things that I love in the show is the way that you kind of weave in that theme of immigration, whether it's through Anya's job or just the idea of being Irish and moving to the UK, which is a whole thing as well. And it, you know, as someone who moved from another country here, it really connected as well. How did you want to set about including that in the story and weave it into Anya's
I don't think I actively went about it. I just think it's maybe my point of view. I haven't lived in Ireland since I was 18. So 2 years ago, what's the maths on that?
2 years in the future from when you're 16 now.
Help me out. Do it on the calculator. So yeah, it's a short time. But it's funny because a lot of our chats on the show, naturally, I don't think I realised how much of an immigrant story the whole show became until I was actually on set with so many of the actors. So like, I mean, Asif, you've moved around in quite defining stages of your life, like as a teenager, as a kid, and over here. And it's funny, just most of our cast are either the children of immigrants or immigrants. And I sort of, more so than looking for female voices, I think I I connect with sort of maybe what might be described as outsider voices in a sense. And all of our classroom, there's no one there who's, you know, doing an accent. Everyone is actually from the country, and then I wrote it up depending on who we cast. And then that would naturally lead to conversations on set about what you found, what you didn't find. Actually, Maeve, sorry, it's a real Maeve night, but Maeve wrote recently about the privilege of being an immigrant in a country, especially now if you have white skin and if you speak English as a first language, and to know the layers of privilege you carry as certain immigrants and the countries you have. Now is a great time to start on snacks. Immigration. Do you have any more plastic bags I could open? Sorry, I noticed everything. But yeah, I think that's quite an interesting thing that I was very aware of the privilege I have as an Irish immigrant in England and when we're in America as well, how you carry that, and just to see different. Also with the loneliness theme, how much lonelier it must be if you arrive in a country with all of your personality, your complexity, ready to make friends and integrate, and you don't have a language, and you're trying to communicate with people and show your full self, but you can't because of this big wall in front of you. And so that's a big reason for the English class, is for that reason, like how much you just can't get yourself across. And that's kind of why the thread is there with Victor in episode 2. It's because I'm kind of writing him off as a very, like, we in a longer cut of the show, we had him as like me often saying, you're such a strong silent type, you know, and you're just one of those people who just doesn't use words much. And then at the end, he's like chatty, but he hasn't had the space to be his full chatty self. And even it's embarrassing. Like, I remember at school, and when we were learning French, the person who put a bit of effort in was ridiculed. You know, if you're learning an accent and you go, alors madame, when you're 14, you're like, shut up, would you idiot? Like, whereas actually to kind of speak a language, you have to give it some Wellian drama to communicate. And that can be really vulnerable and embarrassing in case you get it wrong. So, especially the older you get. So, so that sort of, I see that because I kind of am wandering around the world a lot of the time as an outsider.
And for you, Asif, I was curious about if part of the appeal of the character of Vish was actually that culture isn't the thread of who he is and how we see him on screen. Because there's an episode coming up in the season where we meet his family and there's no conversations about culture. It really is just about family coming together.
Well, it's so interesting. I actually grew up in England, so I had this strange homecoming sort of experience of going back and shooting Aisling's show, and it was so nice to have to play a family that was Indian or but British, but it was not like the episode and all the scenes have nothing to do with that. It just has to do with family. It just has to do with the dysfunction and all that stuff of like what you deal with and the juxtaposition of Anya and Shona's family compared to Vish's family and who they are and how they deal with their issues. So it was really nice to actually play that because so often, as an actor and as an actor of South Asian actor, you end up playing into those stereotypes of who South Asians are in the culture. And it's always about the otherness. It's about the difference. It's always about like, oh, this is how you're not, of the majority culture. So this was nice to sort of have an entire episode about family and Vish's family. You meet them and they're just like any other, just a normal. So it was nice. It was nice to play it that way. So I'm glad.
My brother-in-law is. Oh no, thank you for. My brother-in-law is Indian, and what I was really aware of was he's like, oh, we were like always hanging on to any Indian family that was on TV or any like they were all like losing their minds when they said Asif was in the show because like everyone knows any Indian who does well, and they were like, wait, there I am in some way, right. And so it was in some way a bit of a love letter to my in-laws' family because. Just because I love them so much, and they've taken us in, myself and my sister in England, and we're the immigrants, they're British, so we're like the immigrants in their family. The only big thing was just generally just how much spice Irish people can take and that can't. Oh God.
There's actually a great joke in episode 4 about that. Like when I won't give it.
Yeah, but yeah.
although you can watch the whole thing on Hulu right now.
Yeah, great bit of branding there, Asif.
When you were mapping out and writing the show, there's so many great little tiny moments with Onya where there's just like little details that kind of show her mental state and how she's feeling about things. Like even when you and Sharon sing Zombie by the Cranberries, which is, I think, my favorite scene of the
Beautiful
entire
singing.
season.
Thank you. I'll finish your sentence for you. Yes.
And you're physically standing behind Sharon for that scene, which felt like a really important choice. So how did you go about just mapping where you wanted to thread those little additional pieces in to tell her story?
Yeah, it's funny. It's a nice thing that you notice that, because to make it's not like Onya's character is crazily far away from me, but she is different to me, and she is a second in command, and I'm an older sister, so I've got a little sister. But with Sharon, I do kind of follow along in a sort of like little puppy sort of fashion behind her, and I definitely wanted to show the little sister dynamic of, here, hold that, and the sister just naturally holds it. A little sister just takes a thing. I remember when I was still living with my sister, another Irish friend came over to stay while she was working, and so there were 3 of us Irish girls living in the house, and she was also a little sister, and her name was Siobhan, and my sister's name's Sinead, and I was in my bed on my laptop, and I just didn't fancy getting up to get my charger, so I went, Sinead, will you bring my charger? And the 2 of them scuttled in with chargers. They'd heard the intonation of a direct order from the oldest and just naturally come in. Both of them brought it. Oh, did you not mean me? Sorry. Even though I hadn't said Siobhan's name, she was a little sister, so she scuttled in. And so I wanted, especially there's a dynamic with I think a big sister and little sister, that the big sister would take the lead and the little sister does the harmony underneath. And that's kind of a metaphor for their relationship generally. And then that sort of caring thing as well, that you the roles you fall into in family, and even the same with the in Vish's family, the little brother and the older brother, and that everyone kind of punches down. Or we wanted Nickel, who plays Asif's little brother in episode 4. There isn't enough space at the table, so he sits, even though he's like a 26-year-old guy, he sits at the little table with the kid, the granddaughter, and there's no question. It's just that's where I sit because I'm the smallest and so deserve the least respect. And just that family dynamic. So I that's kind of how I was able to sometimes extricate myself and put Anya in there, was to play lower status to Sharon. And Sharon really, you didn't see episode 3, but in episode 3 there's a lot of punching. She's from quite a punchy family. And whereas we're not really punchy physical with each other, Sharon goes for it in every single take. Do you remember that? We were doing the walk around and you're leaving, and she punched, by the end I just this big bruise, and she's going, oh my God, sorry, did I hurt you? I was like, yeah, you hurt me. But she's used to just punching, and I just took it. And it was only at the end of the day I was like, oh, maybe I should have told her to go easy when we weren't on camera. But yeah, so that's the dynamic there.
You also weave between tones so quickly and so delicately at the same time. Like in that first episode where we see you joking around with Sharon and then she leaves and there's the moment in the bathroom after. Was it important to you that both of those tones coexist on screen together?
Yeah, I suppose I don't think of them as juxtaposing. And I don't know if that's an Irish sentimentality, that or if it's mine and Sharon's, so we don't notice that difference. For example, this lovely dress, but with sneakers, and it works. So that's what I tried to do with the show a little bit. Is I don't. For me, those 2 things don't. And I think that's maybe sometimes. I mean, I didn't write the show being like, this is a big show about mental health, guys, so listen up. And maybe the reason people are like, oh, great, you can sense it. It's because I don't believe that that's the big flag on your head if you're unwell or if you've got anything going on. You aren't just, your sexuality, your gender, your race, what's going on with you. You're your name, you're your history, you're your family, you're your complexity of multifarious things. And I don't know if it helps to have shows where there's a big old diagnosis that follows someone around and then they look out the window in a maudlin fashion, because that's not what happens in real life. You have a big old fucking crying, then you have to go to work the next day or you have to cease, and you don't, so that's to me more like real life than to kind of do a big scene near waves where you're like, oh God, that doesn't... it doesn't happen.
The Diane Keaton.
Yeah. Well, no, Diane, she does do comedy and things very well. But that's maybe I don't see them so every time someone asks, I'm like, oh, I don't think they're not. They don't. The flavors aren't sort of in the same pile.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about your stand-up career as well, because a lot of people know you a little more for that than acting, but acting's what you've been doing the longest, and you just started stand-up about 7 years ago.
They're like, meh.
And what that was like to learn and hone a completely new craft as an adult, because it's not something that we do very often.
Stand-up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Had you been an actor before doing The Daily Show?
Yes, I have. Yes.
And then were you used to corresponding, or how did you just jump straight into like?
I was thrown in like in the deep end.
Yeah.
In that, so,
Yeah.
And so I just had to learn how to swim. Like, for me, for the first year I was on the Daily Show, they were like, "He's terrible. Just keep him in the studio. Don't send him out to talk to anyone."
Yeah.
And so I had like the cushest job of all time. And then they were like, "Oh, he's actually good." And then I was like going out to like just podunk wherever. Changing in bathrooms, so it was, but they threw me right in, so it wasn't.
That's sort of how I felt
Yeah.
with stand-up a little bit as well, because I'd been an actor grafting away since I was like 16 or 17, so last year. And then as soon as I started stand-up, I was on TV within a year, and I felt such imposter syndrome, and it's only taken until recently for me to go, no, I do actually know what I'm doing. But for a lot of people to have something on TV and high profile within something you feel like you're still crafting, especially when you know another craft that's nearby and you feel you know what you're doing, that's a very, it was an odd feeling. And I'm not, I think it took about 5 or 6 years for the imposter syndrome to go away. I think it's just also, if you've grafted at something, it's not to say you walk around feeling like you're owed something, but if the success happens, you're like, I don't not deserve this. This isn't outside of something I'm not going to give myself a nice dinner for. But if you feel like you haven't worked and you can see other people grafting and they haven't gotten the thing and you just sort of get it quite easily, you're like, no, life's not supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be awful and hard and sad. So that feels a bit odd. So then you make yourself sad to almost go.
Did you feel like that it was easier to go into stand-up? I'm sorry, I don't mean to ask questions, but
no, it's about time we got to know each other.
I'll just leave.
No, like to go from being an actress to like being a stand-up. You know what I mean? Like, was that a transition that actually helped? Being an actor helped you with your stand-up?
Definitely, without a doubt. And I'm sure you were the same. Like, you didn't have to kind of know where cameras were, how to like make sure your voice is being delivered or how a line works. And even being on stage, just knowing how to walk about stage, how to look at people, to play to the masses. Stuff like that really does. So you can bring in a few skills. The skill was learning how to be myself, and the why you are funny as you rather than when you're pretending to be someone else. And that took a while. And also to work up a thick skin, like people and, in the time I started stand-up, suddenly there was the internet. So people who were 5 years older than me, or 5 years ahead of me rather, those people maybe didn't have, when they first went on TV, a load of people on Twitter telling them feedback. And to have to learn quite quickly how to deal with like people online, even if they're being positive, how to deal with that, how to people giving you an evaluation of your work quite directly. Stuff like that was just another skill to learn how to deal with that side of the business, I think, yeah.
And speaking of that feedback, did that play into your mind at all with the fact that you're making a show that deals with deeper subject matter within a comedy, and the responsibility of the fact that more people will probably come up and tell their stories to you, and a lot of people have done so since you wrote a Guardian article about your father as well?
So about, just to give that context, about 2 years ago, I wrote an article for The Guardian about my dad who took his own life when I was a kid. I know, sorry guys, to ruin the vibe of the evening. But I wrote an article and I wanted to make it not irreverent about the subject, but I wanted to make it funny so you could read it without feeling like the world's going to fall apart. If you talk about a subject like suicide, it's not going to ruin the day or the dinner or your chat with someone. You can move past it if you talk about something. And in that way, it also sort of loses its power. Because it's not a talked about subject, which I completely understand. There's a lot of historical shame around suicide. There's cultural taboos. There's so much stuff around it. There's people just being in such shock when they lose someone that way. I sort of maybe didn't expect so many people, because they don't want to talk to The Guardian, people want to tell you their stories. And I feel very grateful that people felt that, but I'm not a journalist, so I don't have something set up or in place for people to contact me other than my Twitter and my Instagram and Facebook. And I'm thinking of doing something with that, maybe setting up an email address or something. But with what sort of, I suppose this show in a way is a little bit of you just can't reply to everyone's message. And that feels awful because every message that came through was unique and someone else kind of sharing their story. And it feels really inhuman to not reply to people, because even though it might be a piece of typing on Twitter, it's still someone going. You can feel what people are going through when they text something as well. And I suppose in a way, the show, in terms of what your first question was like, the first layer was sisters. I think by the time I got to writing the last drafts of the show, this is sort of maybe a response to everyone who got in touch. Because I'm not sure if anyone's seen the full show yet. It's all available on Hulu to stream right now. Always branding. I think the final scene of the show is a message to everyone who got in touch. And it's sort of like, all you can do is keep going and give it another go. And so that in a way is that's the most maybe I am myself in the show. And that's like there's a reason there's up in the title, and it's supposed to be hopeful, and that's why it starts from broken, and it's about building yourself up. It's not about falling apart. It's getting better looks like this, it's sort of and a lot of shows are about kind of going downhill, but this is hopeful. This is about keeping yourself together and knowing it can be done. But it doesn't always look like montages and a tampon ad, woo! Now I can skydive, woo! Woo! Would never skydive on my period. An eagle might come and be attracted to me and catch me and carry away from the scent. But number one. But yeah, so in a way, what's been nice about the responses I've been getting from this show is that because maybe the show is hopeful about something everyone's going through and isn't about something is hidden or untalked about, a lot of the people who are getting in touch have felt like maybe more of a relief and happy, which is a lovely feeling to get. That's maybe more, I feel like maybe the people who are getting in touch, the messages are less fragile or less secrets or less the first time people have said something, which is, that's been really nice, and that's maybe a little bit more why the final version of the show looks the way it does. That's the extra layer of it, maybe, as a response to that. Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you kind of like a similar thread of a question in terms of, Asif, for you with politics, because you landed that great job on The Daily Show, and all of the comedy that you do now is very political. You speak to a lot of the administration right now very openly. The world is burning, literally.
They don't take my calls. But
and the point at which you suddenly realized that your career was going to go in this much more political avenue than you maybe had anticipated beforehand.
I never thought it was going to go there. I think it was a moment. Sometimes, life just happens and you go with it. And when I got on The Daily Show, for example, it was a moment in our history. It was 2006, America had just gone into Iraq, and 9/11 had happened, and here I was, a brown Muslim face on a satirical comedy show, and there was nobody speaking that voice at that time, and there was nobody standing on that fence between cultures, being able to speak about the inside and the outside, and so it was a real privilege for me at that moment to be able to use all of my tools, and then I learned so much about writing comedy and satire and the politics of it all. I think it was interesting because like once I got on The Daily Show, I had all these people came up to me, like a lot of brown people, a lot of like immigrants, a lot of people who were like, they were like, oh, you're us on the show, we're so glad you're there, and so that suddenly became a responsibility that I felt simultaneously proud and intimidated by. And my parents were like, please do not represent anything about Islam on the show. You don't know anything that you're talking about, and so it was kind of like but it was a moment, where I was able to take it on, and then I was And then I, with the help of all the brilliant people at that show, was able to find my voice around that. So I never, sometimes you're forced, I mean, like today, I think, you know, we're sometimes forced to become activists out of necessity because of what's happening in the world. And I was just sort of an actor trying to, before The Daily Show, I was just an actor. And then suddenly I became an actor and I had a platform and there was something to say, and I was like, I better say something because this is the moment. So I was fortunate
and to be able to use
that.
comedy for it.
Yeah, and to be able to like use comedy as
easy.
such a incredible tool to, I mean, like what you do with your show, like it's just an incredible tool to be able to talk about things and deal with things that are often things that are hard to talk about or deal with, or things that we're struggling with, you know, as a culture. And comedy is often, because comedy can put the lens over here. Everyone's looking at it this way, and then comedy suddenly comes around and points out the thing or in a way that you've never looked at it before and makes you laugh. And when you laugh, you exhale and you're able to breathe. And so that's, you know, a really powerful thing to do, you know. Smoking cigarettes is the same thing, but it's not quite as...
But I feel like it's something that you've also done very specifically with your career and your platform, Aisling, and I'm curious about the importance for you in utilizing that. Like, you and Sharon did that great video for the Repeal the Eighth in Northern Ireland when there was the abortion vote. You used your comedy to talk about feminist issues, just even women feeling safe walking down a street, and how important it is for you to weave that into the work that you do consistently.
It would be lovely to not feel you had to. And it would be great. It's so boring. It's so boring to have to to feel like you're like, oh, I should. And like, you know, I'm sure you're the same. It'd be lovely to just get all the roles you want and not have to feel you have to reply and be the voice of something, or just feel like, you know, you're your complex self with just your dreams and the things you want to do. And there was a long time where I just didn't want to talk about gender, because I was like, I grew up in pretty much an all-female environment until I was 18. I had no father or brothers or really uncles or anything like that. It was just women. And so I got to be my full self. I could be a completely complex person. I didn't have to be sort of the girl or the, you know. And then it was such a shock when I sort of went to university and we're like, what? I'm in a pot and there's only a small, so I was very lucky to have the steely kind of thing of knowing you're weird, not me. But let me tell you why. Like, it's odd that you think I have to sort of, you know, be smaller or just kind of play one thing all the time, or that there's only a certain amount of space, or that there wouldn't be other people like me in spaces, which, it was odd. But we're not there yet. And we're not there yet in terms of representation. In no way are we. And I think intersectional feminism is so important as well, that like white women don't roll the door up afterwards going, well, we got that much done, you know. And I think that's extremely important, that if you've ever felt like an outsider, you're aware of your responsibility to other people, to maybe we can all collect together and do something in that way. But it is, sometimes you're like, oh God, I'd love to just go on and just be me, rather than like, oh, great, a girl or a female, you know, or like even like the idea, a female comedy. Female isn't a genre of comedy, you know? It's not a genre of comedy. Slapstick is, whatever, but it's not a genre. And you're like, oh man, you know, like all those male comedies you hear about, or a male-driven movie, you know, and you're like... So yeah, those things are, but it's slowly getting there, and it's people pushing through, and we had that talk as well, about like how, especially at a turning point when you're a kid, that's when it's really important to see people on TV. I remember one of my friends, Nish Kumar, who, did you meet Nish when he was over here?
No.
He's a British Indian stand-up, and he was saying, like, when he was a kid, he was seeing like Asif on TV, and he was seeing the Kumars, which is this big chat show on British TV, and he was like 12 or 13, and he was like, oh, I can be that. But he says he can see the sort of maybe more defeated attitude of people who are maybe in their 20s seeing that, because they'd grown up with not seeing themselves in any way portrayed. And to see it as you're a kid just means it just your inner bit where you can still be molded, it strengthens up. So that's when it's really important to, yeah.
And I just wanted to ask you both, kind of going back to the show, what aspect of it that you each feel personally the proudest of, and if there's something that you really hope audiences take away from that.
What do I feel proudest of? I mean, that we maybe got it made a bit. Do you know what I'm proud of? If people don't like the show, and you can see some of them leaving now, but God love you. No, I needed a wee before I came in, so fair enough. And they're like, it's not a wee, we just don't like you. But I'm really proud of the show, and I know that sounds like a weird thing to be proud of, but I'm rarely happy with the thing. I'm always like, oh, I could have done it better. And I'm not saying the show is perfect or that we don't have more conversations to have, and if we get a series 2, that we would try and make those things even better, or learn from what we learned and didn't do right first time round, or things to finesse. And to be proud of your work is such a nice feeling, because it means that if someone doesn't like it, you're like, Grant, you don't like my stuff, there's nothing I can do about it. And art and food and all sorts of stuff is things that people like, have tastes in. You don't have to like my stuff. There's loads of other stuff to watch. Go watch that if you don't like it. But I know I like it, and I haven't really had that with stuff before. I feel like some of my work, I want to put a caveat at the end going, oh, I was very sad that day, or someone just dumped me before that gig, or whatever it is. You know, you want to add a thing going, oh, I know. You know, whereas with this, I'm like, no, we really worked really hard to. So yeah, so that's what I'm maybe proud of with that respect. Oh, thanks very much. Oh. You stayed. Now go out and tell the people who left. Yeah. Are they? Come back. What about yourself?
Oh, you know, I think that as an actor in this business, you just end up doing stuff that's so shite sometimes, you know, and you just do it because you gotta pay the bills, and then, you know, and then you get a job where you just get to work with like really talented people, and the writing is great, and it's funny, and it's dark, and it's great, and you just get to do good work, and you feel like it's just that collaborative experience, I think, you know, of just working with really talented, funny, smart people who wrote a great show. And so, you know, as an actor, it was like, she was sort of like, you want to do my show? And I was like, of course, you know, why?
I didn't know, because we didn't have the conversation after our sexy Santa moment.
Right, we didn't actually have it right there, like, but I basically called my people, you know, because that's what you do, and said, you know, I'm doing it because it's just good, you know. And so I don't know, it was, for me, that was the thing, just to get, you know, and then get lots of Kit Kat bars, because
we gave him so many biscuits to go home with as well. He was all like, I love the British biscuits, I miss them from home. We have a few jokes about Asif's accent.
That was when I thought, oh, I'm getting fired, before I even got hired on this show. Because they were literally like, because I grew up in the north of England. So I had this, when I was a kid, I talked like that, you know, the right northern accent, like that. And they were, and Aisling was like, yeah, you could just do that accent then, just do that. And I was like, great, so I'll just do that. So, and I was like, I'll talk like that, just know. And then suddenly Channel 4 was like, could we see a different accent? Could he do them over? And then there was like, literally like me sending in, I think 15 different versions
different
of English accents. And I was at home going, and I was telling my wife, I was like, I think I'm fired. I think I'm not even going to be on this show.
And you could do all of them. What we were trying to do is match up. We were like, will we be able to get a family all to talk like that in episode 4? And it was like, whereas it's easier to get London-y families. So now we have a joke about the fact that you went to New York and had, because
like, and then Alex, the director, was so great. He was just like, and then I would keep pushing to do more of the accent. He'd be like, just, you know, you spend time in America, so let's tone it down a little bit. Because I just wanted to get on.
Hey, louse me, yo, Vish. I just come from the East End. Whoa, what die damn all the ducks. I'm like,
cut, Asif. Can you just do your normal voice? Just do that. What do you mean, Governor? No, this is my normal voice. So, anyway,
yeah. Well, you've both done such a fantastic job in putting the show together. I hope that you all go and tell all your friends to watch it
tell
on Hulu.
Tell all your friends, American people.